Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newburyport Historical Commission meeting for the August 8th, 2024. We're at the Senior Center boardroom in, on High Street and also via Zoom. Do we have anyone attending via Zoom at this point?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. So we'll start with our usual roll call in alphabetical order. Let's see, Andrew and Bernhard is here. Biff Faust is here beside me. Scott Clark is down there. Yeah. Alan Marquis over there, right? Ed Neumer is here. Chris Sawtell is there. And myself, Chair Glenn Richards, is also here. We have desk Gretchen Joy doing note taking, and Caitlin Sullivan here as well. Christopher Fay and Mark St. John are absent. Okay, so there may or may not be a public comment period. I suspect not. So I'm going to skip over that for now. If we do have one, we can review the procedure for that. There's really just one item. There's no DCOD or DOD or demo delay hearings tonight. There is just a discussion of 25 Water Street, which is the Custom House Maritime Museum. We have the director here, James Russell, and Bob Cronin, who's the chair. Is it the chair of the trustees or board? Okay. So they're going to talk to us. Let me just set the stage for this a little bit, especially for some of the newer members. The Custom House, you may know, it goes back to 1835. It's noted designer Mills, what's his first name, Robert? Yeah, who also designed a number of famous buildings in Washington, D.C., including the Washington Monument, for example. After its use as a custom house, back when Newburyport was a pretty busy trading port, it fell into some disuse, and I think there are probably some pretty horrifying photos of some of the abuse it suffered over the years, particularly when Newburyport was not doing well economically. But as you probably also know, it's now it's in private hands. As the museum organization, is that like a nonprofit organization? So it's not city property. The city sold it or transferred it to that organization. They run it as the Maritime Museum. And a number of years back, I assume that the first preservation restriction was done as part of an application for community preservation funds. Because, you know, the museum needed a lot of work, still does need some. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes. So when you apply for Community Preservation Act funds, there needs to be a public good, and there's certain criteria and so on. Of course, they qualified in a number of accounts, a number of criteria there. But the preservation restriction was a way of guaranteeing that these funds that go into restoring and preserving this wonderful structure will be preserved. It's not going to end up being torn down in the future or whatever, although it'd be pretty hard to tear it down. That it's a testament to its extremely robust construction that it survived some of the abuse it suffered in some of those bad times. So that's kind of so they are here. And correct me if I misstated any of this, I'm sure you will anyway, that to do kind of an informal review, not a formal one where we have to take a formal up or down vote to approve or disapprove, although I don't know, you might do that on light fixture. Yeah, okay. So I guess one of them we will do. And the other one is to kind of get inform us as a commission on what some of the plans are, what they'd like to do. The gist of it is to try to make the museum more accessible, particularly for people with disabilities, and bring, just improve accessibility overall. And I think that's really all I need to say. Who would like to speak for you guys? You, James, or? Okay. Okay, well, I'll turn the floor over to James and Bob. Yeah, why don't you come on up to the table if you like. We'll pick you up on the owl thing here. I should mention Andy Boyd joined us. Where would you like to? I think you have a presentation, correct?
Yes, we do.
Would you like us to project that? There we go.
Get out of the way.
All right, the first slide is that light fixture. Do you want to start there, or?
Yeah, do you want to? Well, yeah, I just wanted to, kind of start by saying that 2025 is our 50th year, so it'll be our gold jubilee. And we're really working towards celebrating 50 years, because back in 75, or just a little bit before 75, I mean, there's a derelict submarine on the lawn, there's, fire department coming down as people are burning, insulation off copper wires, you know, on the waterfront, so, you know, we've come a long way. And when James came on board, and I took over his chair recently, but it's kind of planned, one of the things that we are really looking to accomplish is to make the museum more accessible to everybody. And it's a real goal that we have, and I won't get into the minutia right now, but when you look at the museum, we have very limited street front. We have no real side, you know, one's Custom House Way, the other's a parking lot. So there's no property that we own there. And then the back of the museum is really a flood zone. So we're really limited in that. When you look inside the museum, and again, not getting into the minutia, but when Robert Mills designed it, he actually had to come up here and teach the artisans how to build the museum or the custom house, because he was using concepts that were just totally unfamiliar with anybody in the area. So respecting those interior design concepts and really not being able to mess with them anyway, we have a unique set of problems that James, particularly, and myself are trying to solve for. We think we have a solution, or at least 2/3 of a solution. And that's kind of where we are moving forward, and which we are trying to move the ball down the field. So the first thing, though, is finishing this portico project at the front with this lantern. And before you get into it, if you just look at the picture, you can see right now, basically we have 2 spotlights there that were probably purchased at either Kmart or Home Depot. So we're trying to upgrade this. I think you all know, or most of you know, Greg Collins. He's architect that works very closely with us in our building committee. He has suggested this, we can get this through Newburyport Lighting, we can get it through a distributor in New Hampshire. But with that being said, that's kind of what we're looking to get. And you know, James, if you want to add to that.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
I do
Some
too.
there is just about as ugly as sin, and
Yeah.
but this was totally appropriate. There's another one.
What are the dimensions? of
Oh,
that
it's,
light fixture?
12 by 19.
Yeah, 12 is that is like the approximate diameter, looks like it's the overall diameter.
Yeah, no, and we're expecting
17.
17 by 12. Yeah, we're expecting to hang that so it doesn't really take over from the historical doors we just put on. So it'll be hung up a little bit higher. And that's Greg's suggestion. But that would be it.
Speaking of doors, Bob, there, I was reviewing the preservation restriction, and in this description talks about front doors being original doors, so is that still true?
Yes, my understanding is there was a cheaper way to do it, and that was to get new doors. And so those front doors have this rather cute curve, which is a lot of fun. But apparently that's wood from the Constitution. That's the story that has been passed down to me. It's got a pretty
That's what they're
heavy
saying.
2D coating of epoxy paint on it. Yeah.
So I was gonna, I forgot to mention in my little preamble that, spent a lot of time this afternoon reviewing the Secretary of Interior standards, you know, in preparation for this discussion. And they have a whole section on, taking historical structures and either making code compliant, ADA compliant, climate resilient, all of that stuff. So there's a lot of guidelines there, and it's clear that they understand that, even with a historic structure and, preservation restrictions, whatever, you can't think of these things as hermetically sealed, locked in stone, whatever, you can't change a damn thing, but more like, okay, sometimes you need to make changes, but there's ways to do it correctly and ways to screw it up. So, in this case, it would be a kind of thing that it's almost on the borderline of needing to review it. It's appropriate to review it because it's not usually when it's a replacement in kind, those things aren't typically reviewed. They're considered just, and it's also you're not destroying any historic fabric, affecting any permanent thing. It's easily reversible. It meets all of those kind of, check boxes as the kind of thing that's okay to do. So I'll ask my colleagues if they have any questions or comments on this particular thing, and what we'll do is we'll take a motion, have a motion whether or not to approve this, and then we can have the discussion that you'd like to have on some of your other ideas. Yeah.
I got a question. Is there any documentation of any sort of lighting that was there once upon a time, possibly? Any more photographs or anything that might have?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is no, because if there were, that's what we'd be recommending. So the conversation with Greg, who we lean to in this historic preservation stuff, is looking at the style of the building, what would have been the most likely type of lighting there. And I was at Oak Hill Cemetery the other day, but and he did that particular renovation there and was lantern hanging. But that wouldn't have been, that wouldn't be appropriate for this building. It's that's a different architectural style. So we kind of lean heavily on Greg when it comes to period reproduction pieces like this, and unfortunately, there aren't photographs.
And just the other thing about Greg, when you read the deed restriction, his name is all over that deed.
In terms of preservation restriction.
The preservation
Yeah,
restriction.
I noticed like a lot of photographs and so on.
Yeah, he closes his eyes and can tell you what's above, the floor, the ceiling in the restroom.
Yeah.
Which you just did, but.
Yeah, I think he also did that large book that has like the record of, like everything you want to know about the custom house. I think that was largely his doing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he knows too much about the custom house.
As a matter of fact, he's on some retreat and he's doing the custom house as a case study. I just got that email today.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts? I'd like to make a motion that we take, as per usual, would be phrased in the positive, so it would be to approve the replacement of the light fixture with this mentioned Lumiere. And so yes vote would be give them the okay to do it, and of course, obviously, no would be against it.
I can make a motion that we approve that light and picture.
And I will second it.
Okay, so that was Biff and Andrew, right? Okay, so we'll go around the line. Let's see your vote on that, Andrew.
Yes.
Okay, and yours, Biff?
Yes.
Okay. Mark's not here, sorry. It was thought he was gonna be there. Scott, why don't I call you Scott? I'm sorry.
As an alternate, do I still?
Yeah, because we have, because Chris and Mark are absent.
Yes.
Okay, and we have Alan Markey.
Yes.
Okay. And Ed Meyer.
Yes.
Okay. Chris Sartell.
Yes.
Geez, I think we're unanimous, eh? Okay, well, that was relatively easy. So you have our okay to make that replacement. So that's the easy part. I have a feeling that some of the other stuff is maybe less easy, but let's
Okay, let's
proceed.
keep going. This is the fun one. Okay, by the way, good to be back. So I think we'll be back here with some degree of frequency in the next.
You're gonna be a familiar face, huh?
Some big plans. So. We're looking at about 3 phases of growth over the next 3 years. We feel like we've hit phase 1 with the opening in May, with upgrades, with the exhibits, and I know you've all visited and seen those. And that's completely upgrading the displays in the first and second floor, and that's going very well. People are really picking up what we're putting down, and that was an investment in the collection. Acquiring new pieces, getting items donated, and the philanthropic winds are blowing our sail. Concurrent to that, we're starting the masonry full repointing project, and I'm glad to report that we raised about $250,000 for that project. And in addition to CPC funding, Mass Cultural Facility Funds came in with a significant gift to help us really do that. Instead of a patch, which we're going to do, we're now going to do a full repointing. And that's important because there's a lot of moisture coming into the building. When you get nor'easters coming in, you need the latex paint, which acts as an impermeable barrier, just bubbles up the next day. So hopefully we're going to get that all taken care of, much to the delight of our neighbors, with diamond saw cutting for about 6 weeks straight. They're gonna love it, and that's going to happen in the fall. So that's going to help start protecting the environment. So then we say, okay, where do we want to bring the museum? And I would say it's at the moment, while we're trying to repeg it, it's not necessarily a kid-friendly, family-friendly space. It's got brick floors, it's relatively inaccessible. Even the subject matter is geared towards adults. So we ask ourselves, what are these hurdles and what are these barriers that we can knock down? Whether it's in the stories we tell, so telling gender balancing, and also looking at different stories, kind of about what you're doing on the park at the moment, is going to help. We say we're looking at our mission structure and looking at some models where we may even reconsider those barriers to entry, and you'll see something in the paper where it's going to be free to entry citizens for about a month. We're going to test it, and then we say, well, how do we get more school groups in? How do we get more families in? How do we get younger audiences in? And is there a barrier to entry with handicapped accessibility? Maybe there is. My understanding is from a former school superintendent. It was the first time I'd heard it. It's the first museum I've worked at that's not handicapped accessible. But apparently, if a superintendent knows that a building is not accessible, that they have to think very carefully about sending their students to it, because it may create an inequity. So we need to solve for that. We need to be mindful of it. And in conversations, with technologies have improved, the ability to put aesthetically pleasing lifts and ramps in, that's improved. And also the access board in Boston is, I think, embracing digital technologies where it's just physically impossible, are very, very difficult, let's say, for people to get to the second floor of our building. And so perhaps we're going to use, we're going to present augmented reality and virtual experiences. So we're really trying to reach a threshold of an equivalent experience if you can't have the actual experience. And that may be acceptable, which would then allow us to say that the museum is ADA accessible, which would be a really interesting milestone, because as Bob said, because we don't own the pertinent land and we've got the Merrimack there, so it's not too smart to build pits that's just going to fill with water. We're really constrained, not to mention, I'm sure you're not going to be too pleased if we start taking diamond saws to the granite, so busting out windows. So, you know, we moved, and not to mention our ability to fundraise to solve for those, right, which. Would be a multi-million-dollar project, and quite frankly, we don't have the to. Do that at the moment, so is there a cost-effective, while expensive, is there a solution which can allow us to maximize our programs and take as much of the space into Custom House and have it public facing? And to that end, we're trying to move our collections offsite and we're even looking at moving office space and possibly moving that offsite so that this historic structure, which is really neat, but it's kind of hidden in places, as you'll see, because we've had to make offices out of spaces and that's kind of obfuscating the aesthetics of the building. So these solutions make 3 floors relatively accessible, and we think it's doable. Or I'll put it this way. I think we have got to really run this down hard, and if it's not doable, I think we accept it, but it's not going to be from a lack of effort and work. So that's what we're going to.
Quick question, Jane, I just want to clarify one thing. You mentioned the land on the either side. Can you clarify for us how much, if any, real estate is, if you're looking at the museum from the front, Water Street, on either the left or right, and you've got the backyard, so to speak, which has, you know, the problems you mentioned, but on the left and right, I have a feeling that on the right side, where there's parking and so forth, well, I'll let you answer, is any of the land on either side belong to the museum? I see Andy shaking his head.
It's really a straight shot on either side down,
Really?
you know, like I said, so Custom House Way, we've had the discussion, some of us have seen discussion about lower Custom House Way, right, so that's not contiguous.
That's a public way?
No, well, there is a public way back there that provides for the front portion of that, but that back portion is not resolved by the prior land court, you know, decision and so forth. So long story short is, we don't have a continuous way on the other side. That's why there's not something built there and there's other stuff, you know, sort of there right now. But, you know, as I mentioned, there's not any land on the other side. So basically, even actually the front of the building itself is only a matter of feet really from the front bottom of the steps to the public way. So the public way and the brick there is actually pretty wide out to the building.
Right.
So the property is actually relatively small right around the building, and of course the lawn goes with it,
Right.
but that's just,
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah, so clearly that imposes limitations.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, the reason I ask is because a lot of, in reviewing the guidelines, one of the points they make is, you know, if you've got like a facade that's really iconic, you know, what you want to do is rather than disturb that, try to put something in the back, the side, one of the less less prominent facades. But obviously that's a problem, right? I'm sorry, so go ahead.
Only to say I'm delighted to let Andy take the lead on seeing if we can get some more. Yeah.
We'll talk more about it.
I should
Putting an
say,
elevator though in a public way though is
Yeah.
that's the issue, right?
Yeah,
It's
I
hard to
would,
do that,
I
right?
could see that would be a
and by the
problem.
way, when we get to it, ramps are obviously out because this thing is gonna snake from here to, you know, Newbury if we put a ramp up. Some other points, it's interesting, we're just looking at unique visitation in July and it's, I mean, give or take, these numbers aren't hard and fast, but it's about 30% of our visitors are kids coming in. I thought that was an interesting take. I think the kid focus will allow us to explore 365 programming. And, you know, I think that's going to be useful and helpful and meaningful in the community come, you know, the cold months when you're not outside playing baseball and things that you should be doing in the summer. Just a museum kind of nerdy factoid, but 60% of adults who go to the museum say that they did have a museum experience when they were a kid. It's almost like marketing. It's one of the reasons why we want to have kids come from schools to museums, so they start.
So by museum experience, mean that same museum? They come there? Okay, okay.
No, that's it. In talking to Bethany over at Museum of Newbury, I understand this strategic differentiation, so we're not stepping on toes. And so I think what we're proposing is not something that's also being done there. So I think this is finding a niche, and I mean, there's some things there that she just is awesome, and why would we move into that lane? But this is an area which I think is not happening, so I think that's important to us because we want to. And then this kind of paradigm shift where we're moving from. It's a pretty technical term like fuddy-duddy history museum and trying to make it into an active space. Think about an art gallery. You don't say art gallery, I've been to that 5 years ago. Why should I go back again? Because you know somewhere in your head that they're rotating their shows every 3 months, but no, a month, but nobody says that. You just know that. And same thing with a history museum. Somehow it's built into your head. I've been there once. Why should I go back? And I've heard people tell me passionately how people must come to the museum and it's great. And I said, well, when were you last there? And they said three years ago. And I go, 3 years ago, that's my point. So, you've got to be coming back with frequency. And so how do we create that dynamic? And that's going to be, I think, very helpful for Newburyport in general, because then people are coming to the downtown and it brings aliveness. So if we're going to live up to our rather lofty slogan of being a destination for people, well then we have to knock down barriers and make sure that our programming and our initiatives are aligning with those ideals and be very clear about what they need to do. So this handicapped accessibility we'll talk about. This also will help our cohort of members, and many of them are have ambulatory issues, so this will also help there.
May I ask a question? Maybe it's a dumb question, but how is it that you're not handicap accessible?
It's all grandfathered in. It's an old historic building.
Oh, that's how that works.
Yeah. By the way, the
I'm good.
structure of the building
Just curious.
is such that it's a series of arches built on arches, so you can't drill up.
Yeah, no, but I didn't, but it's grandfathered.
Yeah.
Actually, it's great.
But just maybe to drill down on your point is we have no requirement, or obligation to do anything to make the museum accessible. We think it's a dual win. It's a win for us and it's a win for the community.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why we want to invest the money in it.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
By the way, everything we're talking about is totally reversible and not invasive, or a couple of photos and granite. And maybe before we go to the next slide, I've been very impressed with what happened on the waterfront. Congratulations. I mean, that's just a major accomplishment, helping us in so many ways, including, flood protection. But here we have this great lawn and it's, while it's nice if you're having a wedding there, it's not like we have a lot of programmatic activities there that help the community. And it wouldn't be nice if we can have this indoor-outdoor experience, particularly seeing as we put these nice big red doors in the back. And so, again, we want to say, okay, how can we utilize all our assets to help? So that's all.
There was just an article in the paper about what looked like school groups and kids at the museum. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how do I phrase this? So the current status of access problems did that present problems for that activity or?
No, well,
In other words, how did you manage that?
yeah, so we're now into session number 3 or so with Jim Keenan with the Boys and Girls Club and Salisbury, just terrific. I mean, that's a narrow pipeline, right? Because it's limited to the number of kids to can fit in the bus, but they've been coming since January. It helps because Jim's a 501c3. So it probably is going to be a little bit more difficult, and there may be more restrictions when we work with Newbury Youth Services, for instance. I don't know that, but I would imagine that the latitude and the ability to be opportunistic with a 501c3 is different from the community. But overall, we are seeing an increase in tour groups for schools. I think it's up to 100% or so in last year. Well, by the way, which is a misleading number because the number is ridiculously small, and it needs to the total number needs to start getting up into the
Yeah.
1,000, 2,000 range.
What that did look like, there was a real emphasis on active stuff, like you were saying, so.
Yeah, but we are seeing an increase in attendance, which is positive.
So to make sure I'm clear, so your goal is to get handicap access to the ground floor, but you're saying that the inside of that building is a series of what granite arches that make it
Yeah.
effectively prohibited to go to the basement or the second floor?
Yeah, from the basement up, there are brick arches backfilled with dirt and sand. Okay, that gets to a second floor, first floor, second floor. And it's a fireproof building. It's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Why it's a fireproof building, but that's a real limitation because you can't break the arch. So that means that we can't just run a shaft up through.
This one,
Okay, let's get into the. So this is all basements we're looking at, or ground floor sounds a little bit better, I guess. And again, we want to make some of these publicly facing, so there's a kids activity zone, your discovery center through here, so it's about 1,000 square feet, depending on how you count. This leads out to the back, it just goes out to the lawn. Going down pretty narrow staircase here. Okay, so here you're looking from the lawn, you're going through the new doors that we put in. There's a little bit of a ramp. There's your arch. Very aesthetically pleasing neon lighting there. So what we want to do is we want to, there are aesthetic pieces here which involve you want to be on light covers and the like. But we want to maximize space here. This is coming down stairwell, so this orientation is here. But this is kind of a really nice architectural detail because this goes into a growing vault here, and but then you can't see it because it's frustrated by this plywood door here, which goes into an office. And does that office really need to be there? Is that the best place for that office, or is it better if this is more oriented towards kids program?
So the floor plan that you showed us in the previous slide, that's not the existing, that's the proposed, right?
Well, if you just you should back. Yeah. So I mean, this is all here, right? I mean, we're not.
In terms of where the walls are, right?
Yeah, we're not touching walls and knocking anything down. This used to be a boardroom. This was chock full of stuff before we moved it out. This is the office that it was just a
Okay.
prefer to turn into.
Okay.
We got mechanicals, bathrooms,
Okay.
have to do something with the
So
bathroom.
right now, there's really no public facing thing down there.
It's a little fish in our fowl, right? There's not enough kids activities, there's not enough office, and it's not ideal for interaction. So we're saying, okay, let's just focus on one thing and make it that, so it's kind of organic.
Okay,
Yeah, but folks do go down there. I mean, that's still open to the public.
especially if they want to use the bathroom.
Right, yeah.
Right. But you go, just go back one, I mean, what's going into the space, right? We're not just moving out of space. There are series, and I took them out of the slide because unless you really want to know how to do points of sale for being a kid or such thing, there are a series of 14, 15 or so interactive stations, and it's everything from learning points of sale to touch time to whale ecology through the helm with TV screens and monitors when it gets rolled out. So that's what's going into the space along with the classroom space. All of the activities.
And I just mentioned to those who aren't familiar with it's more than just an arch. There are these, I think they're referred to as groin vaults. So yes, they're arches, but they're very complex in the way they intersect from, all four corners, and it's a rather complex masonry thing, and it's called out quite extensively on like both the preservation restriction and the Form B for the property as one of the very unique historical characteristics, identifying characteristics of that particular property. So that's, yet another reason why you don't want to mess with those, besides the structural reasons.
So here's, we can really start anywhere on these, I mean, this whole project breaks into handicap, accessibility issues, kind of medium to. Lights, infrastructural construction issues and then the programmatic, items. So what we want to drill down on, and by the way, we're not sure whether this is gonna pass muster once we go through all the permitting and talking to different agencies. Because we're very restricted from this point to this point here, it's about 9 feet, give or take. So it's not a lot of space, and we obviously need a means of egress, and we take big stuff in and out of here with frequency, so we don't wanna make this so small, but there's something like give or take about 45, 46 inches that we think we can will be acceptable, and Bob, you've had a conversation with the building inspector.
We need, I believe, 44 inches for egress, for pedestrian egress, and then we can use the rest for,
Go lift or something.
handicap accessible.
And so we're looking at about 32 inches. We can't go this way. We're not drilling in or grinding down granite. So a solution, well, there are a lot of solutions that won't work. Obviously, the lift doesn't work, right? A ramp doesn't work. You're gonna be, the other side of Water Street. By the time you're here, because this actually slopes down a little bit. And then there was a chair on a.
Like one of those stair lift things.
Yeah, and that runs right across the opening, so that's out. So the only solution left to us is some sort of a lift like this. And even this lift, we have to ask for a variance to go from 36 to about 32 inches, just because the guts of the thing that rises it out sticks out so much. And we're trying to hit this mark. So we've got very little variance, but you can see that. Again, minimally invasive here, and we can possibly in a footprint like this, put this box in. Is gonna have to be bolted to this wall, but if that's the only impact it has, that's not so bad. These aluminum doors need to get out anyway, because you can't have doors opening right next to a step, so they've got to be removed, which gives a landing, somebody rolls on. And then obviously there's the electric to this, there's pouring to pits, there's the phone line and the communications that needs to happen. So this is the first thing that we're trying to, this is one of the items that we're going to look at pretty carefully. And this is around a $50,000 amount. So this is number one.
And forgive me, that is what I'm looking at is, those are the red doors at the back of the building, and that would get you from there to the lower level.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, the advantage of this is, we're not gonna, if a school group calls, we can get your students up and down. The second thing is, we can now spill our indoor programs outside, as you're going right out.
And just to pile on, some of our older members, when we do events, could possibly use that area as watching it virtually if they couldn't make it up to the second floor. So it gives us, the young, the old, everybody in between.
This is one of the classrooms. So this is my first year here, and I went through the beautiful humidity and heat stage that we all went through. The problem with museum is we were able to manage the heat with some degree of effectiveness. But once the humidity hit, it was a real problem. A problem to the point where artifacts were getting mold on them when kept in the basement, not on the first and second floor. It was an uncomfortable environment for the kids to be in, be a little concerned with the mold buildup, with anything organic, pieces of plywood, for instance, if they were backed next to the granite, they were getting mold on it. And so, okay, well, this is not an ideal situation, and also. Just creature comfort things, if the kids just face slams in the brick, it's one of the best, it's not the best thing that happens. So we're looking to create, essentially a box within a box. And these specifications came from Greg Collins again. And so this is a floating floor system. We're using, he's recommending steel studs, so we're not putting anything organic on the brick because there's certainly humidity coming up through there. And then there's a subfloor, obviously there's some sort of a vapor barrier. And we hope that's going to provide a level surface with not much of a lip, such that we've got a nice floor. And then at least on the exterior walls, maybe not necessarily on the interior walls, we're looking to run up all the way. Again, with the same sort of a system here, using that same gypsum we use in bathrooms, that's a very good for moisture resistance. And again, some rigid foam insulation, etc. So what that means is, from the static point of view, we cover up the granite. And the brick floors, by the way, are not original. They were put in 75, so not too concerned about the brick floors, and put it in 75. That wasn't original to the space. And I think we may be able to keep the brick on the keep the granite exposed on the inside walls.
So those brick floors were not, that was added in 72, huh?
In the basement,
In the basement.
the other ones were original.
So what was there in the basement, do you know?
Dirt,
Really?
remember, that was storage, that was,
Yeah,
It was a break on one side.
a what?
It was a break. It was if you didn't pay your taxes, that's.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
in the stairway coming down into the basement,
All right.
used to be a trap door and a ladder.
So,
I see,
what we would do is we repeat this,
okay.
trying to find a solution here that's pretty good. So I'll give you an example, some very interesting documents with founding father signatures on them, and they're in the basement, which is not the best place to have old documents with founding father signatures when you know that the humidity is off the chart. So they've all been moved out, now they're all off-site. So that's why I say this space is, it's a very poor space in collections. It's not a great space for offices because your checks are pretty sodden. But I think.
They don't cost that much that way.
You know, we can use, plastics and, PVCs and membranes to try, and then just airflow to try to make this.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of discussions we've had with the Museum of Old Newbury, where, it's not just a structure, it's also a museum, and they've got these collections, and some of the things are quite valuable and quite perishable artwork and so on. It's very similar discussion, where, they've also had to deal, with HVAC issues and climate control issues, and very much same kind of issues you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's quite a conundrum, actually, because you've got the collection that we're beholden to look after as best we can.
Right.
We've got a building that we're beholden to
Exactly.
look after the best we can, and guess what? We've got people.
Yeah.
And those don't necessarily overlap. If you build a museum from scratch, you can make those Olympic rings connect. But, ideally, you'd just, this is supposed to breathe, right? It's supposed to breathe through the granites, and if that was the only thing you were trying to protect, but these collections we take in, and there are obligations and responsibilities we have to take care of. But that's one of the reasons why we moved out of the basement, and we're pushing to the first and second floor, where we can control those spaces just a little bit better. So what will be coming to you would be, again, putting flooring in two of the rooms and putting in
And that's all the first.
You know, do you already have any kind of HVAC going on down there at low?
No, think of the logic, it would be nice to run dehumidifiers there to take but that, now that's gonna suck in moisture through the mortar. That compromises the mortar. Not only that, it's kicking out heat, so it's already hot, and then you got this thing kicking out heat, so it's like Sisyphus just rolling this rock up the hill. I mean, you might as well, I mean, literally, we were dumping 6 dehumidifier buckets every couple of hours. It's absolutely asinine. It makes no sense, right? It's just not a proper solution to this. And so what I'm hoping is that if we can do this solution with the wall and floor, that at least 2 of those can be at a point where at any point in the day you could move in there, whether it's the winter, where it's also cold, the planet. By the way, in the winter is obviously now retaining that temperature from outside, so they're difficult places to be in the winter as well. Okay, this is looking outside. So now, right here, this is where the double doors are in the back, and we're looking straight to the Merrimack back here. And this, this line is interesting, right? This is the nuisance flood. We know exactly where it's gonna come down through, so we haven't, this is very much in a preliminary stage, but we're looking at what can we do for lines of defense, if there is that nuisance flood. When it comes to hydrostatic pressure, I don't think, frankly, there's a lot we're going to be able to do about this. We know that there's a flood, that there's this cooling of water here on Custom House Way, which is more of a nuisance thing. I mean, it drains pretty quickly, but that goes into a little bit of a hollow there, just like that drain. But that's something that
We can take a look at that, yeah.
we could look into try to solve that. This we'd like to solve at some point, and then there will be some sort of a patio solution, probably. If you go to the next slide, Caitlin, I think. Again, this was over Yankee Homecoming, and we're trying this with kids' activities. And this is something we'd like to do on a weekly basis over the summer. It's not just once in a while, it just becomes a normal part of our operations, which I think would be really tremendous. And then we could start cleaning out some artifacts. There's Bob's cannon.
But your personal cannonball?
Right, yeah, it's privileges.
And then they want to start paving some of this space, maybe from the light pole back to the building, just to give us a stable service to put some of these artifacts on. This is pretty cool, actually. It just came our way. It's the only lighthouse service tender that I know of, and Chatham Ipswich had it, and it's stamped on its US Lighthouse Service. That's pretty neat artwork. So, but the point here, you're coming in this door or you're coming out of this door, and there's a point of entrance egress. So you're going into activities, and kids can go in there, do their thing, and then they can come out, and this becomes very much an indoor and outdoor space. And I think that's going to bring a lot of activity, and perhaps, I look at all the activities that's happening on Waterfront Park at the moment, and I say, okay, well, can we be a bookend to that? Because it comes from a parking lot, but is there some activities that can take place there as well just to balance out and really bring a nice closure to all the fun stuff that's happening down that sculpture park and the cool swings and the like, which are further down. So I think that's, there's one other item. This is kind of the big enchilada. And this is trying to solve to getting people to the first floor. Now, again, we're solving for the second floor, possibly with virtual reality. You can imagine, the goggles going on, and you've got a joystick, and you zoom into a painting, and you go this way, and you go into a gallery. So that's all doable. Actually, it's open source. design software that we could possibly use. We were initially looking at right behind the buoys, and I put one in, when I was in Nantucket, I did it with a historic house, and it was right under 50 grand, and it worked just fine. But it doesn't work here. So unfortunately, this solution is more expensive. And this is, I don't know where this is,
That's Cheers and Bot,
Oh,
that's
that's
the
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
It's familiar, yeah.
And the idea here is you've got this incline platform. Now this is where the preservation restriction comes in, because it specifically calls out, the railings, and obviously this is the front of the building. So we have to be very careful how we approach this, and there are obviously limitations. This is about $100,000 to do this all told. This folds up, obviously. This can wrap around the column and kind of hides to one side. And perhaps it could be camouflaged to some degree, but I guess what we're looking for now is, directionally, we're not, there's funding limitations here, right? We may not make our mark, I hope we do. There's static considerations here. You all need to look at it, obviously Access Board needs to look at this, Mass Historic Commission is gonna wanna look at this. But obviously building inspectors, so on and so forth, so, there are a lot of hurdles here. This is looking like the best solution to get people to that level, which then at least gets them to the first floor, and then with that little lift from this, on the ground floor, we've now done 2/3 of the building. And that is perhaps a more elegant, efficient solution than looking at building a tower block at the back of the building or along the side of the building, which is just impossible to hide. And we kind of know what that's gonna look like. It's probably gonna be a glass structure with stairs, and it's gonna be a monumental challenge for us.
So the idea that I seem to recall you discussing earlier, of having some kind of lift like that on the side of the portico, that it wasn't working out, is that what I understand?
That's what we found out just yesterday, because what we were looking at there, sorry, I don't have a close up of just the building itself, but we were hoping to come up here,
Mhm.
and then there's a ledge, there's 5 feet. That gap is 5 feet,
Okay.
so it'd be like a landing craft, right, if it drops down, so now you get onto that granite ledge, which is hidden by the column. Fine, no problem, but how do you get from the ledge doing a 90-degree turn to come into the door? So that would have had to have been a Lego plug and play platform. And that essentially sunk the idea. So there are other reasons why this was not palatable. It was going to require a metal or maybe 2 metal channels being bolted to the front of the building, and that's what this was going to track up and down on.
Yeah.
You're also looking at a big box,
Yeah.
which would be quite visible. And the recommendation was, given where we are, that this even may want to have a cover on it, which makes it even more, I mean, whatever but the buoy covering up a certain amount of it, it's not going to cover all of it. So, there were aesthetic considerations there, and then there was simply just practicality issues with how do you bridge getting the person to this point across the granite and in there, which was going to be some irregularly shaped aluminum structure that somebody has to put in place.
Okay, so like that, yeah.
And I was just gonna just add to that, that because of that 90-degree turn, that platform was going to have to be bigger than what would be necessary. And when you did that, you got back to the egress issue, because the front doors are only 5 feet wide. so you can have the 44 inches.
So that picture there is Cheers in Boston. So,
Yes.
so where's the actual platform on that? I see the
There
two
is a-
black,
Well,
So-
there is, if you go,
trying to picture how that
okay,
works.
It's probably.
in there, but that's the platform on the left. And as James said, what we would do is you can make these as simple or as difficult as possible. And when I say that, it could come straight down and be sitting in the middle of the stairs. And we didn't think that was a good idea. So it could wrap around that Cheers at 90 degrees.
Right,
Right, and we said, well, what if we did it 180 degrees?
we'll bring it all the way
So
around,
we bring it over and it's now camouflaged
kind of behind the booth there.
at the buoy
Yeah.
at least. And if we have to move the buoy, I think we have to move it an inch. You know, and that's really, I mean, it's, when we measured it, it's like an inch. So, but then it would be out of use, it'd be completely in.
Okay. Interesting. And the floor, if you will, of that platform, it doesn't, it folds up to make it more compact or whatever. And you
Yeah.
fold it down when you want to
You
use
can
it.
store in two places, you can, so it's you're looking at a rectangle here, or you're looking at a rectangle just behind.
Yeah, so I'm asking is, right behind you, James, on that, then one that shows the platform, is it always in that position or does it fold up? It always folds up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's got like dimensionality of,
Yeah.
like it's less than 12 inches, I figure out what it said, but it's.
Right.
Yeah, this sort of, it's got this sort of dimension.
Yeah.
To it.
I think maybe just trying to.
So I could,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, thank you. And this is why I think all this work should be done, generally speaking. I think it'll be all good for access, good for the city, good for the customer, not necessarily bringing people in. My only concern actually, since I was to do was this graphic right here, only because I actually, and Glenn's question, and then the others, your reaction might be the same as, I was just looking at the blue square essentially, or the rectangle. That looks to me like it's subtracting from some of the sort of ideal sort of symmetry that you get with the building as you're sort of seeing it there. So I think that it might be just because the graphics that you're showing, we're only showing part of what it can do as a mechanical feature. But in essence, as you're pointing out here, it seems like this, even though it's a panel, it's there, or it's a platform that's being used as people are getting access, effectively it's essentially folding up and then rolling possibly around the column to the side, where effectively you might be seeing a railing or something like that, but for the
Right.
most part, all the time, you're not really seeing it.
Right.
You're only seeing this platform and thing. So I just, that's why my initial reaction when I saw this graphic with the blue
Right.
was to wonder, like, is this gonna be like a permanent feature that's in that location? And I actually just went by there again today, because I thought there was more space in the steps and around. I was looking, I'm like, wow, it really is more narrow. So I think that addresses the spatial issue, but to me, being able to roll it, you know, essentially 180, where it is around that and hide it behind the buoy, essentially, to me, addresses my concern.
Yeah,
Because you're maintaining the most important to me facade of the building, which is the one that faces Water
Yeah.
Street. So
yeah,
I think that's a pretty reasonable
Yeah.
way of doing it, in the sense that, you know, I was first sort of put off by the idea of like subtracting from the staircase, but it doesn't really have to do that, because
Right.
the only one that's being used,
right.
that it's there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So is that, am I understanding that
Yeah,
correctly?
that's, yeah, this is, you know, the beauty of our, right?
Right.
And one last question on that, is it an educated guess that can wrap more than just the 90, but all the way around? to
Yeah,
do
that,
Or,
we were told that
Oh, okay.
the only issue is that we spend more money.
as per usual,
Yeah, and, the rails, the double rail comes in stainless steel.
Mhm.
And again, the option, which I think we'd pick up, would be to blacken it.
Hmm.
And it would blend in a lot better. Yeah.
period, appropriate.
It'll need a pitch, our slab, but the slab can be camouflaged by bricks on top. But it's gonna need a 6-inch slab of.
Sort of weight limitation with the one you're considering?
Is there a weight limitation? Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So
Uh,
how do you decide what, I'm sure there's some sort of standard, right? There's a certain.
I don't know what I mean, it's gonna take us, and it's probably not. Now,
Only because you have it as a certain size, but then you have to have considerations, which means you have to keep your railings and et cetera, you know.
And this is an assumption, this is how early we are in this round, I'm assuming it's taking one of the electric driven wheelchairs plus the weight of the person, right? I imagine I'm making that assumption that it's spec to take that
Yeah.
weight, so that gets it up to 400 pounds probably. That's easy to check.
I know it's a limited square footage, so it's only gonna be able to manage a certain weight anyway, but. You know, I guess what is that, and if you had to, for some reason, upgrade that. How would that impact that design, if at all, maybe not at all. I think it could be a nothing question, but, you know, you get a person in who's in a wheelchair, but. Maybe a little on the plus side, you know, have any kind of, weight considerations you should consider, that's all.
Yeah, the only thing you can be sure of is there's definitely a maximum weight that I can take.
Most people will not be able to use it, right? That's
How easy is it to operate? I'm kind of curious, would anyone know how to use this, or you have to train somebody?
We're learning this as we go, so both of them. I think are gonna require dedicated electric to them, so we have to, work that through. They need to have call stations, whatever that looks like, I think it can't be digital, so I think it has to be a hard line, is what we've been told. So there's a number, it's not just, you're not just buying a lift.
Right,
You're buying,
right.
There's some other things which.
But it's self-operated
That's what I was wondering.
self-operated
Self-operated.
and or remotely operated by.
By
somebody.
the user or
But no,
someone.
by, say it was a little kid. An adult could operate.
Okay,
And the self-operation is by key fob, not by key. Because you don't want that twisting motion, everything is just touch.
Yeah, it's a good point, yeah, and you can't be stumbling out of the pub at 1 in the morning and taking a little joyride. And so there's a call, I think it goes to a call. Here's the, 4-digit number you put into the fob,
I got
and that operates the lift, and that opens the door, so it's magnetically locked, until you get that code.
Yeah, is there a video? I mean, it would be kind of helpful, if you have a video, it said, here's how this thing goes like this, it folds down, it folds up, put it on the corner. Basically,
Sure.
I think that would be extremely helpful, to say it folds up and neatly in the corner is great, but. I think generally speaking, you say, oh, it looks great, but you still have those other apparatus that are part of the operation that is visible. And you can also see how the operation, how smoothly it works, how it opens up, how a person could get in and move around, that would be, I think. Help sell that point of like, this is. works great.
You might even be able to point with like a hyperlink to some, I'm sure the vendor has like.
the vendor would have, the vendor would-
So they're willing to say like, hey, you're.
Yeah, sure, come on up and show us how much, how you get it done.
You gotta have. YouTube on that one.
And,
Or even something.
and one of the things that, was communicated to us. Or to me by several different, avenues, is this type of lift is the court of last resort for, architectural access board. This is, hey, we can't do an elevator, we can't do a lift, we can't do,
This is the answer,
this is the answer, there's no other, this is it.
There's a few buildings, this is one of them that I think is squarely fitting within that type of exception. I think the BBRS, I mean, we expect this to be an
I
exception.
mean, if they can do it in Cheers,
yeah, no,
So you're gonna, I think the functionality of how it operates during the summertime is nice and beautiful, for operational in the winter. What other considerations do you have to have if it's being used in the winter? Does it have a certain diamond plate, or how does it get managed? How cold does it have to be? We got -20 degrees, might not be open anyway, but we don't want somebody to get stuck in there because of hydraulic fluid is not, whatever the operation is, right?
Well, I know from my family, a family member, that there's nothing to do with this project at all, because these elevators and elevated people don't necessarily, or his elevator company does work on this. That, you know, they have all their mass, you know, standards that it has to perform in this type of weather. You know, if it's gonna be outside, it has to do this, has to be inspected twice, once every 2 years, has to be serviced by a licensed,
Answer my question around maintenance of the,
it has to be a licensed elevator mechanic. It'll be inspected by the state once every 2 years.
you gotta do this, it's gotta be good for 30, 40 years and maintenance of it and all that.
Well, the only thing you know, the maintenance is gonna cost a lot.
Yeah,
And the materials have been spec'd out as stainless steel, so that's going to be a purchase, some to it.
yeah, the maintenance would cost, price up a lot.
So when we were looking at the lift to the basement, you can go online and they put in freedom lifts and you're able to get one for $9,700 and I think it's 10% off this week, right? But it doesn't come with a lot, right? Getting something
Right.
to maintain
Comes with
that,
nothing, yeah.
getting that certified, and so what may be great for your home, even though this said it was commercial in
Right.
ADA, is gonna be very different.
Well, and even really where the service comes from, you know, you buy this, to your point that it's of last resort. When you need service, does the guy come from Allentown, Pennsylvania, or are they coming from, you know, Worcester?
Well.
Makes a difference.
So, Gary, that's-
Well, often time, because it was the guy from Allentown, he says, I'll get to you in 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, the
Yeah.
Freedom Lift, I think, is coming from Canada, so try that one, so, but. Having access is a non-trivial point, because these things will break.
Yeah, yeah, so. Where's this, you know, what's the turnaround time and what's parts on something like this and, you know, get into all that.
Well, one of the companies we were talking to initially, they have techs all over southern New Hampshire,
Okay, not bad, good.
you know, in their licensing.
So has this discussion been helpful to you guys?
Yeah, well, I guess.
I'm not
We're
sure.
looking, so, well, I just simply throw that back to you, I mean, I haven't heard any of you say these ideas are nuts, I haven't heard you say, oh, yeah. Don't say that, I think we had more of a heated discussion on whether we were gonna put a wood sign or EDC sign. So, you know, I think at this point, we're looking for, direction. You know, we're like in order of magnitude, so we're looking for direction. Just in terms of how this plays out, just from a timeline point of view, there's probably 3 different timelines. One is like building the interactives for the kids is within 6 months. The dollar number, and that's not particularly large. They're relatively simple to make, parallel, and that'll be done. So that's timeline number 1. Timeline number 2 is the infrastructural build outs. But gosh, this is pretty darn easy construction we're talking about here. This is not hard, right? I mean, it's almost a volunteer job, except we would want to just make sure it's done right, so we're gonna have to pay a little bit for that. So that's timeline number 2. I think funding willing, that would, and I wouldn't be necessarily looking for CPC funding, which would, you know, push it out, let's say, quite a bit. And, you know, then we're looking at these lifts, which is the longest timeline, obviously the biggest dollar nut, and the most, we really just work through all the specifications on it. So that's the longest. And let's say we do apply for CPC funding, or when I talk to the Mass Cultural Council, we could apply to them again in September, which would be terrific. So that we're not carrying all the load here and it's shared. But again, that wouldn't, you know, that pushes that particular implementation out quite a ways, which also buys us some time.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we get it.
I remember, I got an email from Mass Historical about the housing bill that we just passed, or the budget that just passed, there was funding in there that kind of enhanced the credits. I guess maybe it's more of a tax credit, I'm not sure, maybe the first I'm not understanding. Anyway, there's been certain tax credit, I think they're tax credits, I'm not sure if they're for historic restoration activities of, certain properties and so forth. There are a lot of conditions and all that. Is that something that you has already explored in any way, shape or form?
As a way to finance, as a way to finance.
Yeah, just that's something that would help with the
Yeah.
financing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't cover the whole thing for sure, but.
Yeah, and the short answer is no, they're tricky.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not a short timeline. Had a mixed success in previous construction projects using that. Or let me just put it another way, sometimes 501(c)(3)s investing in a philanthropic solution is often a more effective, quicker way to solve it as opposed to looking at tax credits.
Just have a question. I just looked on Google Maps and I didn't realize how the stairs are configured on it. That lift device, have you talked to like the manufacturer to see if it actually would work? Because I didn't realize that the steps actually go up and they're right at the threshold of the front door. And do you know if have they said, okay, that's still a viable solution under that condition?
As of yesterday at 11 was.
Yeah, I was looking at the same thing. There's a-
We're getting the platform anyway.
I think they're relying on that, I think the platform effectively it's hovering above the stairs, and it meets the upper threshold. Like the bars are actually serving as a structure.
It's the platform that's actually created.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not to say that it doesn't create other issues inside the building, because that submarine that Bob started the presentation with, apparently the story goes, maybe it's a pocket full, but they brought in the periscope and it cracked all the marble tiles as a result. So, what's the limitation, like half an inch or something like that? So, quite honestly, to be truthful, I think we're going to have to, so if we're gonna do it, again, you gotta do it right, because we're already putting yellow tape between the granite threshold and the marble. Because that's a tripping hazard for somebody who doesn't have ambulatory issues today. And so I think that needs to be looked at too, but I think that's a much easier problem to solve.
is there any other feedback from us that would be helpful to you before we wrap this up?
I think we're looking for, what are the gates, like what are the concerns?
Well, I know my biggest concern was, when I was reading the presentation before we got here, about in the lower level, I didn't realize that brick was not original, so I was concerned about, replacing that with something else. But, it's been kind of responded to. That was like the main red flag that hit me, because of you talking, historical fabric that, or at least what I thought was historical fabric. So that's kind of got rid of that red flag.
Those stairs going to the basement were put in later. There was a trap door there to get to the basement back.
It's the interior stairs, and I don't know about the stairs that go up to the red doors, let's call them for convenience.
Oh, they're definitely.
Yeah.
So concrete.
My own opinion is that a lot of it boils down to a kind of what they sometimes call a judgment call, in the sense of, because we're trying to balance different competing goals. You have the goal of accessibility, you also have the goal of preservation, you've got, the goal of maintaining your collection, you've got, all of that stuff, right? The human factors, like just making people be comfortable, right? So the devil's in the details to a certain extent, exactly like our colleagues have raised, okay, exactly what's this gonna look like when it's tucked away, how obtrusive are the two, support rails gonna be. My guess is those two black rails that are on the front stairs now probably were not original, but you know, those are probably added later. Because, you know, just, that's what they did back in the day, right? Yeah, you know, I'm sure our modern day ADA people have nightmares about all these courthouses with a gazillion steps leading up to them, right? There we ever see. Anyway, I digress. So, yeah, I didn't see any notorious red flags other than that one that's been answered, and would like to, you know, I know we'd be interested to see how these things kind of get refined to something, and I think like some of the ideas that were mentioned about, you know, videos or whatever that will help us, you know, kind of visualize exactly what the impact is going to be. You know, you've obviously taken into consideration conservation of historical fabric, you know, not disturbing, you know, important historical features like the granite walls, I mean, which would be difficult even if you could, so. Anybody else have any particular concerns or feedback or that might to add on to what I've said? All right, well, I guess,
Well, this is terrific.
yeah. So, yeah,
I'm not seeing it so quickly
Yeah.
because just August, I don't know why it is the case, that there are 10 grants all due, like in the last week in August. And so getting this kind of
Okay.
information is really nice.
Actually, I had a comment, it's nobody really said too much, I think. Having an ADA compliant to the best of their abilities is certainly worthy of like of all of us to be able to do it, and to be able to say, well, it's just not gonna look good, so we're not, I don't think that's an acceptable answer. I like the fact that, we're looking for a solution, for the best solution, we're looking for this, because it's important, as you said. And I think it's very much worthy of our time to be discussing.
Oh.
It's, I'm not gonna say, it's just not gonna look good, so therefore I'm like, we didn't. Let's make it function, let's make it happen. You know,
Yeah, I believe, it hit me a couple of months ago there, Newburyport framers have been helping us tremendously, and because concurrence to this, we're trying to put all the, those documents using glass and archival backing and all this, so it doesn't get burned. I wanted to thank the guy who was actually doing the work, and Matthew rolls out in a wheelchair. I guess you're not gonna be seeing this hanging at the museum anytime soon. Matthews are there, they're just not gonna see it. And so I think you're right, I think it's,
yeah.
these are the best solutions that we're.
People are coming in.
And I agree with some of, my sentiment here is like we were saying, but sort of balance here, right? It's policy wise to me, this is, what's the point of having the history if people can't,
Right.
everybody doing access, right? So that's, we're trying to do exactly that, and I think this is reaching a reasonable balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it was encouraging for me personally to, well, two things. One, the care and dedication you guys are showing to do it right. But also in reading through the secretary's guidelines, they get it, that there are valid reasons for needing to, you can't keep something necessarily pristine, sometimes you got to do something, but if you do it well, it's okay, people understand. And okay, here's this beautiful building. Yeah, okay, there's either a ramp or whatever, a lift or something. Yeah, well, that's great. They've made it accessible, and people who have either the issue or they have a relative or whatever, really appreciate that, so. Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, I
Really
agree with
forward
you,
to-
Glenn. It's the spirit of the building, not the security of it. And you don't want to leave visitors with a taste in their mouth, like, it was good to Newburyport, but that museum, it's like, it's unchanged, it's not been, it doesn't have the accessibility, that's not really something you want to leave with people. And I think it's great you're trying to get the kids in there, so I kind of agree with you that kids are gonna be adults someday, and if kids have good experience, parents come on in, so it's all, I think tapping into that segment is the group that you really want to tap into, because if they had a great time, you're gonna drag your parents back, because parents just want to keep the kids busy, and off the laptop and doing something good, so.
And if you haven't been in since May,
Yeah,
James is currently museum on its ear as far as the new collections being put out and actually put out in a thoughtful way from when you walk in the door. You can just follow the timeline right through the building.
Yeah.
You know, and good. So if you haven't been there, you know, it's well worth the trip.
Well, there's actually volunteers doing that, which is
Yeah.
even more.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Right. Cool.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Appreciate it very much. We look forward to seeing how your plans progress.
We'll be back shortly.
Okay, I'm sure Kate will be happy to get you on the schedule.
Oh, I think she loves getting my emails twice a day.
That's all you get is twice a day.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, gents.
All right, see you.
Have a good one. All right, let's wait, we'll talk soon. Yeah. You're talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Next on our agenda, as they say on here, is the approval of the minutes from the 25th of July. Was there someone here tonight that wasn't here that day?
I wasn't.
Ed, okay. So Ed, I'll put you down as an A for abstain on that. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the minutes for the 25th of July?
Motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Is that seconded?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, Andrew.
Yes.
You're in approval, okay, Biff?
Yes.
Okay. So let's begin that again. Scott?
Yep.
Okay, Alan Markey,
Yes.
okay, Ed, oh, sorry, you're abstaining, Chris Sotell,
Yes.
okay, and, okay, two. I don't really have, did you have any updates, Andy, or anything?
I'm sorry, I can't think of any at the moment that comes to mind.
You don't have to apologize for that.
Yeah, questions, I'll be.
Okay. I don't really have anything that the old jail preservation restriction discussions are going on, just, you haven't been really
I'm
involved
sorry,
on
I'm
that.
not, yeah.
No, that's fine,
Anyway, it's been like
I
a
did-
long process, but.
our last meeting, I mentioned that I was gonna meet with, Chuck's lawyer, which I did, telephone meeting, but we had a constructive conversation, so they are making progress. And thankfully, they had help from not only the lawyer he's been using, but also Eigerman, Jared Eigerman, former counselor, to get that initial, that all those lot lines and all that legal description stuff, get that nailed down. He's doing a proper description that's like the president, but he's, so that's all been squared away. The only last question he had was, all the preservation restrictions have an exhibit called guidelines. And what they are is it's guidance as to, okay, what's minor that you can do without having to come before the board, or what is the kind of thing that's needs to be reviewed. And usually it's like a one pager, and it says stuff like, okay, if you're just repairing something that's, in kind, and it's not gonna look any different, that's generally fine. But if let's say if you're re-roofing the whole roof or doing something more major, it has to be reviewed. Or certainly if it's something that's gonna have an impact on some historical or historically defining feature. Now, what Chuck Griffin is the applicant or the owner and all that. What he's got a lot of stuff that's added to that. And his argument is, well, not argument, his rationale, I should say, for doing that, is that, years down the road, I'll be gone, he'll be gone, it'll be all new people, be a new commission, be new owners, he wants to have more, something that gives them more guidance as to what they can and can't do and what would need to be, reviewed and not. So he goes, so his, I think it's exhibit G in his case, it's either usually E or G or one of those, is rather more extensive.
Right.
So I promise that, does anyone have a problem with that? If as long as it's, a couple of years ago when this first came up, a couple of the commissioners said, Jesus, geez, it sounds almost like a non-preservation restriction because there's so much talk about what is not protected. And I tried to point out to them, look, you don't have to say all the stuff's not protected, because the preservation restriction spells out, this is what's protected. everything else is not protected, you know, it's like, it's kind of, should be obvious. But he likes to go beyond that, so, he's hoping that that will be acceptable, assuming that everything else is too. He's also got some narrative, which gives a history of that particular property and the changes it's gone through. And it's not part of the preservation restriction proper, but he wants to have it filed with the registry along with it, just as part of the historical record. You know, which, and I talked to our guy, I think it's Steinitz at Mass Historical, and you know, he's fine with that. I said, sure, that's fine, it's no problem. It's actually helpful to have, especially in a property like that, where, again, like the Cubson's house, it was once a public property, it's became into private hands, suffered from abuse, I think from some of the same characters, like this Boston Gillis, you know, he had a hand in the jail, the property, he had a hand in the customs house, he was a terror. Anyway, you know, it's all helpful, so I hope hope it's gonna be resolved in my lifetime, or at least my stewardship of this wonderful commission.
Could I just,
Yeah.
add to that? And I could be speaking out of turn, because I think you and Caitlin have probably had more recent discussions with, you know, the attorney and
Yeah.
and the draft and so forth, but I think to your point earlier, as opposed to having that sort of like 1 or 2 page kind of bullet list of what's, you know, made or under review. I think the expectation here is almost like to go with it. I don't have any problem with the length of it. To me, it's more just about, are you okay with the substance? It's almost like there might be some illustrations, I think, to kind of illustrate, you know, what's allowed and what's not. And then you can almost kind of flip through like slides, it's like, okay, we're okay with this, we're okay with this, we're not okay with that, we have a good discussion, right? But it might have some illustrations, I think, to go with it as well.
Yeah, he had a,
right?
yeah, he had photographic illustrations
Right.
with circles and arrows and paragraphs in the back of each one to paraphrase our friend Arlo. So. Yeah. So anyway, that goes on, so there, it hopefully, every year, every fall, I say this, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll get this thing nailed down. Believe it or not, this started in 2019. So it's been a long slog. And you know, it was actually even predates your time a little bit, I think. Okay, so that's the only update I have on that. Also, Taxi Truck made a brief appearance here. He's also with the Parks Commission. He's been, because of his proximity to it and as part of his role in the Parks Commission, he's been very heavily involved in the Bartlett Mall and all that. So he has kind of a historical background there that he'd like to present to us, either as in entirety or subgroup. He's open to whatever. So I think he's tentatively on our next meeting's agenda. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
To just, nothing that we need to, you know, vote on or anything, but just kind of an information session kind of thing. Again, just background on what because he's done a lot of research on the whole history of the Bartlett Mall, the Frog Pond, that's the courthouse and all that stuff. So unless anyone else has anything else, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Biff Bounce has made a motion to adjourn. Is it seconded?
Second, Chris.
And Chris Sartell has seconded. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, all are in favor of adjourning, so we will officially call the meeting to an end. Thank you all. Thank you, Gretchen, for your note taking. Thank you, Caitlin and Andy. And thank you all for your thoughtful comments for the customs house folks. Appreciate it very much.